It's a Tuesday. You're sitting at your desk, or maybe your kitchen table if you work from home, and you've just gotten your paycheck. And for like 30 seconds, it feels good. There's that little dopamine hit when you see the number in your bank account, and then almost immediately, almost without even thinking about it, you start doing the math in your head. Rent, car payment, groceries, that subscription you keep forgetting to cancel, the credit card from last month that you didn't quite pay off. And before you know it, that number has shrunk in your mind and you're basically already at zero before the week is even over. And the weird part? You're not being reckless. You're not buying sports cars or blowing money at the casino. You're just living a completely normal life, a completely normal job. And somehow it feels like you're always just keeping up, but never actually getting anywhere. I've thought about this feeling for a long time. My name is Josh, and honestly, I spend probably an embarrassing amount of time thinking about money, not in the obsessive stock ticker on 3 monitors kind of way, but more like, why do some people with average incomes end up quietly, calmly wealthy by the time they're in their 50s, while other people earn decent money their whole lives and somehow retire with almost nothing? What's actually different between those two people? Because I promise you, most of the time, it's not the salary. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Because I think there's a version of financial freedom that doesn't require you to start a business, go viral on social media, or suddenly start making $300,000 a year. I think it's actually accessible to people with normal jobs, normal salaries, and normal lives, but it requires a few shifts in how you think about money that most people never make. Not because they're not smart enough, just because nobody ever sat them down and explained it clearly. So let's do that. Here's the first thing I want to address, because it's the one that quietly derails more people than almost anything else. Most people, and I mean most people, walk around with this background belief that their financial situation will sort itself out once they start earning more. It's this kind of ambient optimism. Right now things are tight, but when I get that promotion, when I get a raise, when I switch jobs and bump my salary, then I'll be able to save properly. And look, I understand why that belief feels logical. It makes intuitive sense. More money in should mean more money saved, right? Except here's what actually happens. You get the raise. And within about 6 to 9 months, sometimes less, your lifestyle quietly expands to meet your new income. You move to a slightly nicer apartment. You eat out a little more. You upgrade the car. You buy the better version of things. None of these decisions feel dramatic in the moment. Each one feels completely reasonable on its own. But collectively, they absorb the raise almost entirely, and you're right back to saving roughly the same amount, or nothing, just at a higher income level. Economists and behavioral scientists have a name for this. They call it lifestyle inflation, or sometimes lifestyle creep, and it is relentless. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like a mistake while it's happening. It just quietly moves the goalposts so that no matter how much more you earn, the finish line stays roughly the same distance away. The fix for this is almost annoyingly simple, but the simplicity doesn't make it easy. The fix is to save the raise before you ever see it. Like literally, the moment your income goes up, you automate a transfer for the difference, or most of it, straight into savings or investments. You don't try to save more. You restructure things so that saving happens first, and you live on what's left. This is sometimes called paying yourself first, and I know that phrase sounds like something your uncle says at Thanksgiving, but the mechanics behind it are genuinely powerful. When saving is the first thing that happens with your money rather than the last, it stops being a willpower game. You can't spend money you never see in your checking account. Okay, so we need to talk about what we're actually shooting for here, because I think a lot of people have a vague, almost mythological idea of what financial freedom looks like. And that vagueness is actually one of the reasons they never reach it. When most people imagine financial freedom, they picture something enormous, a mansion, retiring at 35, never working again. And because that vision feels so impossibly far away from where they are right now, a normal job, a normal paycheck, they kind of give up on the idea before they even start. The goal feels so unreachable that they don't really treat it like a real goal at all. But here's the thing. Financial freedom, in its most practical definition, is just the point at which your passive income, the money your savings and investments generate on their own, covers your basic living expenses. That's it. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to have millions. You just need enough invested that the returns can carry your cost of living. Now, the actual number for this varies by person and by how you want to live. But there's a really useful rule of thumb that financial researchers came up with called the 4% rule. The basic idea is that if you have a portfolio of investments, you can withdraw roughly 4% of it per year without running out of money over a typical retirement period. So to figure out your freedom number, you take your annual expenses and multiply by 25. Let's say you need $40,000 a year to live comfortably. Not lavishly, just comfortably. Your freedom number is $1 million, which, okay, still sounds like a lot. But here's where it gets interesting and kind of exciting. You don't save your way to $1 million, you invest your way there. And investment growth, specifically the concept of compound interest, does something that genuinely surprises people when they run the numbers for the first time. If you're 28 years old and you start investing $500 a month into a diversified index fund that returns an average of 8% per year, which is roughly the historical long-term average of the stock market, you'd have over $1 million by the time you're around 60. Not because you saved $1 million. You only contributed about $192,000. The rest, the other $800,000, was generated by compounding, by growth on top of growth on top of growth. I remember the first time I actually ran those numbers myself and just sort of sat there staring at the screen. It felt almost like a trick. But it's not. It's just math and time and not touching the money. The problem is that most people either start too late or stop contributing during market downturns because it feels scary. And both of those things cost an absolutely enormous amount in the end. So we've established that the path to financial freedom is basically spend less than you earn, invest the difference consistently, and don't stop. Which I know sounds almost insultingly obvious. But let me talk about how to actually do that without turning your life into a joyless exercise in deprivation, because that's where most financial advice falls apart. There's a version of the save more, spend less message that basically tells you to stop going to coffee shops, never eat at restaurants, cancel every subscription, and live like a monk. And look, if you genuinely want to do that, I respect the commitment. But for most people, that approach doesn't stick because it treats every bit of spending as an enemy, and when you feel like you're being punished by your own budget, you eventually rebel against it. The more useful frame is to think about your spending in terms of what actually makes your life meaningfully better versus what's just kind of noise. There's a concept I really like called spending on your personal values. The idea is that you should spend generously, even lavishly if you want, on the things that genuinely matter to you and bring real satisfaction to your life. And then cut ruthlessly on everything else. Not because spending is bad, but because spending on things you don't really care about is just leaking money with no return. It's the financial equivalent of leaving a faucet running. For some people, travel is deeply important. That's worth allocating real money to. For others, it's food or experiences with family or a really nice home environment. Whatever it is for you, protect that spending. But the gym membership you haven't used in 4 months? The streaming service you forgot you had? The subscriptions that auto-renew into the void? Those aren't enriching your life. They're just reducing your future. When you align your spending with your actual values, cutting back doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like clarity. and the gap between what you earn and what you spend. That's the most important number in your financial life. Widen that gap, and you widen your path to freedom. Let me take a quick detour here because I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk about debt. Specifically, high-interest debt. Because if you have it, it is quietly one of the most destructive forces working against your financial life. And it almost doesn't matter how well you invest if you're also carrying a significant credit card balance. Here's the math that most people don't fully sit with. The average credit card in the United States charges somewhere around 20 to 25% interest. The stock market historically returns around 8 to 10% annually. So if you're investing money while simultaneously carrying credit card debt, you are essentially borrowing at 22% to invest at 8%. You are losing that spread every single year. That is not a wealth-building strategy. That is a wealth-destroying one that looks like wealth building because you're doing the investing part. The right order of operations, and financial planners broadly agree on this even if the details vary, is roughly: first, build a small emergency fund of about 1 to 3 months of expenses so you're not constantly thrown off track by unexpected costs. Then attack high-interest debt aggressively. Then invest. There's a version of this where you ask, but what about my employer 401k match? Should I really skip that to pay off debt? And the answer is usually no. Contribute enough to get the full employer match because that's an instant 50 or 100% return on your money, which beats paying down even high-interest debt mathematically. But beyond that match, the debt payoff should come before additional investing if the interest rate is high. Once the high-interest debt is gone, something kind of remarkable happens to your monthly cash flow. You suddenly have all this money that was going to interest payments, money that was genuinely going nowhere, and you can redirect it toward building wealth instead. People who've done this describe it as feeling like getting a significant raise, except it's a raise you gave yourself by eliminating a cost. Okay, this section might be the most important one, and also potentially the most anticlimactic. Because the honest answer to how do normal people build real wealth on normal salaries is kind of boring. And I think that's actually why more people don't do it. It's not exciting enough to hold their attention. The people I've seen build genuine financial freedom on average incomes basically all do the same few things. They spend less than they earn. Not dramatically, not austerely, but consistently. They invest in boring, diversified index funds rather than trying to pick stocks or time the market. They don't stop investing when the market goes down. In fact, some of them think of downturns as sales. They avoid lifestyle inflation by automating their savings before their spending adjusts. And they do this for a long time, not forever, but for years, a decade, 2 decades. That's basically it. Index fund investing in particular is worth dwelling on for a second, because it's the part that most people either overlook or dismiss as too simple to be real. An index fund is just a fund that tracks a broad market index, like the S&P 500, which represents the 500 largest companies in the U.S. When you invest in an index fund, you're essentially buying a tiny piece of all of those companies at once. And because you're diversified across hundreds of companies, a single bad company going under doesn't really hurt you. The reason this matters is that the overwhelming body of research on investing shows that most professional fund managers, people whose full-time job is picking stocks, fail to consistently beat a simple index fund over the long term. Most of them underperform, and they charge you fees for the privilege of underperforming. Index funds charge almost nothing, sometimes less than 0.1% per year, and they tend to outperform the majority of actively managed alternatives over time. So the uncomfortable, unsexy truth is that the smartest investment strategy for most people is to automate contributions to a low-cost index fund and then not really do anything. Just let time do its work. This is deeply unsatisfying in a world that rewards complicated-sounding advice. but it's what the data says. And the people who follow it, consistently and without drama, tend to end up very well off. I want to end the main part of this with something that isn't really about tactics at all, because I think if you're going to stick with this, if you're going to actually make these changes and maintain them long enough for them to transform your situation, you need to think about money a little differently at a fundamental level. Most people experience their financial life as a series of individual decisions made under pressure. Should I buy this? Can I afford that? How am I going to handle this expense? It's reactive, and it's exhausting, and it puts you in a constant defensive crouch against your own finances. The shift that I think makes the biggest difference is moving from reacting to money to designing your relationship with it. Building systems, automatic transfers, structured accounts, clear targets, so that the right financial behaviors happen without requiring you to make willpower-driven decisions every single day. Because willpower is unreliable. We all have bad weeks. We all have moments of weakness or impulse or genuine crisis. A financial system that depends on you always making perfect decisions will eventually fail. A financial system that runs mostly on autopilot, structured around your actual goals, is much more resilient. Think about it like this. If you had to actively decide to brush your teeth every morning, if it required real conscious motivation and effort, you'd probably skip it more often than you'd like. But because it's just a thing you do, built into the rhythm of your day, it happens. Your finances can work the same way. Saving and investing become the default, and spending on things outside your plan becomes the exception you have to actively choose. This doesn't eliminate the need for awareness or intention, but it removes a huge amount of friction from doing the right thing. And removing friction from good behavior is one of the most powerful forces in building any lasting habit, financial or otherwise. So let me bring this all together. Financial freedom with a normal job isn't a myth. It's not reserved for people who start tech companies or inherit wealth or happen to pick the right stock at the right time. It's available to people who earn ordinary salaries, live ordinary lives, and make a handful of key decisions, and then stick with them. Stop waiting for a higher income to start saving. Save first, then live on the rest. Define what financial freedom actually means for you in concrete terms, because a vague dream is almost impossible to work toward. Understand that compound growth, given enough time, can do things that feel almost magical, but only if you start, and only if you don't stop. Get clear on the gap between your income and your spending, and widen it deliberately, not painfully, by aligning your money with what actually matters to you. Deal with high-interest debt before it quietly undoes your progress, and then invest in boring, simple, low-cost index funds and leave them alone. None of this is complicated. I want to be honest with you about that. The concepts aren't hard. The math isn't hard. The hard part is psychological. It's consistency when it feels pointless. It's not panicking when markets drop. It's resisting the pull of lifestyle inflation when everyone around you is upgrading. It's playing a long game in a culture obsessed with immediate results. But here's what I want to leave you with. The people who reach financial freedom on normal incomes aren't some special category of human. They're not unusually disciplined robots. They're just people who at some point decided that their future security and freedom were worth making a few intentional choices. Quietly, undramatically, they set up a system. They let it run. And over time, compounding did what compounding does. You don't have to do this perfectly. You don't have to start with a lot. You just have to start and keep going. That's really all it takes. Now, if you found this video valuable, make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and comment your thoughts. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.